A little bit of the back.
All right, we're good.
So a little bit of the background for Boone Beginnings is we have our board meetings, and as the board meetings were going along, we did start to notice that we were losing a significant sum every month after reviewing our what was actually spent during that month. And that got some questions because we did raise a good chunk of money when we were building this daycare, but we wanted to know, is that money enough? It was kind of like a ballpark number to start with. Do you remember what that number was, Lindsay?
I want to say it was targeted at 150, but it ended up being more with some of the like COVID dollars that came in and another donor. So I want to say it sat around 200.
So they shot for a pie in the sky number. And one thing that we didn't know is how long that number was really going to last us at the burn rates we were seeing. So we wanted to sit down and come up with a monthly forecast because, as they're a new daycare who has to grow naturally, there's no 23-year-olds that are looking for a place to go in daycare right now. And that is what we have openings for. So we have to grow naturally from baby to toddler to preschooler. We just can't pick up and fill our capacity right now. But we wanted to know how long would it take us to hit that capacity and how long would it take us before we'd stop bleeding money. So to start with, the first thing we did is we made a budget tool. So this is what we used just for this is more of a budget model. So what we did here is this is one of our rooms. So we have a total of 6 rooms. So we have the nursery, willow, birch, juniper, magnolia, and maple. And then as you can see, we'll scroll in a little bit. These rooms, they have 8 6-week to 10 months here, or 10 months. And then this one is 8, 10 to 16 months. And it kind of grows from there to the oldest room, which is 20, 4 and 5-year-olds. So then inside each room, I built just this is way more complicated and specific to us, but essentially we want to know how many infants, how many toddlers, how many preschooler at these rates are we going to see, and what would that give us for a weekly, monthly, and yearly total. So here we had 8 infants. We're charging $175 a week. So that gives us $1,400 weekly, $5,600 monthly, and $67,000 yearly. Well, to run that nursery room for 8 infants, we know that we need 2 teachers. And at the time, we had a lead and a co-teacher. So we made sure to put those 2 positions in there, and we know what we were paying them hourly. And there was some that had a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on their experience. So we were able to plug that in. So right now we have what our income is for that room over what our expenses are, right? And that gave us a return on investment of 1.22%. So for every dollar we spend in this nursery room, in terms of teachers, we're only making back $1.22. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Perfect. So that's obvious when you look at the ratios, right? There's 1 adult to 4 babies. That 1 adult salary has to get divvied out among those 4 infants that they're taking up. So we did that for each of our room. Now let's compare that to our preschool room. And I'm gonna jump over here. It's a little better. This is when we're full staff and full capacity, right? So here it's about $1.30 because this is taking into account some inflation, versus if our magnolia room is completely full, that our Magnolia room is built for 24 and 5-year-olds. And so we have 20 preschoolers at our weekly rate, gives us a weekly, monthly, and yearly income. And then our teachers, we need 2 teachers for our ratio. And that gives us our yearly expense. You divide those things and it's 3.14. It's really 314%, right? So if I spend $1 in this room to pay a teacher, I'm making back $3.14 because of that teacher's ability to take more preschoolers. So, obviously this is kind of a numerical way of showing it, but your ratios of 4-to-1 versus 10-to-1, that's how drastic they are in terms of where your room profitability is, right? I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, but we're able to really highlight that here. So what I built this tool. We've got all of our rooms showing our expenses to run that room and showing our income to run that room. And then we also have admin overhead expenses. So we have 2 floaters that are working, a sum of hours for the week. We have an assistant director, a director, a nutritionist, bookkeeper, and part-time. So we know what all their wages are, and that can translate into a weekly, monthly, and yearly wage. And to do that, we're assuming some things, right? So down here are a lot of our assumptions. So here we're basing it on a 40-hour work week times their, salary. And then we included FICA into this, which Gay does a lot better about knowing that FICA. But this is unemployment insurance essentially. That's all calculated from that. So we were able to figure out what our admin overhead is. So these are people that aren't always in one certain room. They're kind of supporting the whole facility, right? And then the next thing we looked at was our building. So here's SUTA. I can't remember how that plays in. Do you remember, Lindsay?
No, I mean, this was information we got from our bookkeeper and from our director. So before we were playing with kind of like projected numbers, and now we've been open a year. So we were like, we need some actuals back on what this looks like. So they provided this from our just kind of monthly expenses.
Yep. So here's like our work comp, and this is like a federal or a state tax that's put on top of that. So we were working with our bookkeeper and making sure we're including that in our total expenses. We use a payroll software that's $150 a month, and our staffing, so it's paying somebody to kind of do that payroll. But so essentially what this is you're taking a look at your budget over the course of the year, and what all do you spend money on, right? And how can we model that to go into this and give us an accurate result back for our future progression or projections. So, we know the building uses gas because every month Matea goes out and she's paying the gas bill. We know our electrical usage. And now there's easy and simple ways of doing that. You could take your gas bill, add it up for a year, divide it out by 12, and you'll be pretty close. Or if you want to get a little bit more, you can go in and know what like your isotherms cost and how many you're planning on using during your winter months, which are going to be a significantly higher amount versus your summer months where you're not going to be using as much gas. And that's usually, opposite for electric, depending on how you're heating your building. We know what the water and garbage is just based off of what it takes. We looked at some hot months and some cold months. Those are some of the bigger things that change. So if you get a July and a December, your water usage, you're going to use a lot more in July because you're probably running your sprinklers at your daycare versus the winter months. All you're doing is flushing and using sinks and stuff like that. We went through all of our maintenance cleaning contracts. And then one of the biggest ones we were looking at was food. And we budgeted this on $4 per kid per day for food. And that was like our heavy hitter. And then we put some other ones in here that we knew, insurance, office supplies, those type of things. And we came up, all this is our building expenses. So we've got our room expenses, our admin expenses, and our building expenses. And we put all those together. And on the side here, this is how we came up with an overview. So you can combine a lot of this. You don't have to break it out room by room, but you need to know, what are you paying staff? What are you charging for your kids? And then what are those other building expenses we need to lump in to see the whole picture. So over here we have our revenue. So each one of these rooms, we know what our weekly, monthly, and yearly revenue is, and all we're doing this is making sure we take the number of kids in that room by the tuition rate, and we get these numbers. CACFP, that's the food program. That I'd have to double check where that's coming from. But yeah, that's, our paid, our reduced, and our free lunches based off of, I think these are state numbers. And then we were able to find that based off, I think we took it by like percentage of kids that we were having. So this was like 92% of our children would fall under the paid. 3% of our students would be the reduced. And then we did, that's 5% that would be at that free. So from there, we're able to come up with our CACFP. And then we also have enrollment fees. Every so often we'll have students enrolling, and we wanted to just throw out a number, how many enrollments do we think we'll see per month? And that's where it came up with our enrollment fees. And then from there, we could total them all and come up with our overhead revenue coming into our daycare. And that was about $784,000 a year. So then, for us as a board, our first thing was to step back and be like, wow, we're running a $750,000 business here. Like there's big money in daycare, and I know Matea, we're talking, there's a lot more appreciation for what she does, because it takes people to spend money, right? You need someone in there managing it and making sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck. So that was a good thing for us as a board to really come to terms with. And then the next thing we started piling up is, what are our expenses? So we know there's an expense to keep somebody in all those rooms, right? For 2 teachers, and we added those in there. We know there's an admin expense. Those are all these people that, they're not directly going to take care of a kid, but their costs are split up over the whole building. Right. So this lead teacher in this Magnolia room, her job is directly with the students every day. Her income is based on whether or not that room is full. So if there was half the students, that's her job. You need 2 for that ratio, right? Versus, the director, her cost gets diluted over the whole building. She manages the whole building as for her job, and we don't attribute her salary to just one kid. And if we have 5 kids or if we have 75 kids, that doesn't matter. She's paid the same way, right? So if we had 10 kids in this Magnolia room, we'd only need 1 teacher, and that expense would be, it's tied directly to how many students are in that room. Versus these overhead, they're not tied to how many students are there. They're just there, just like your building. Whether or not your building's full or empty, that's just going to be an overhead cost to run your daycare. All right. Does that make sense for people? Or I can stop if anybody's got questions.
Nope, this is very clear so far.
Todd, this is Sarah. I have a question.
You bet.
Can you go into any of those classrooms and when you're figuring your teacher expense, Are you using 40 hours a week for each of those positions, or are you factoring in that you're open 12 hours a day and have to have 2 people there at all times? Because that's more like a 60-hour week.
Correct. So no, that's something we can do. We manage that more on our floater and some of these other positions and the part-time help.
Mhm.
So that way we're trying to stay away from our staff having significant amounts of overtime.
Mhm.
So you can do either way. We'll put it like that. You don't have to put this in terms of teacher, right? So this could just be how many hours are dedicated to run to this room. So if you want to do 60, that would be fine. Just make sure you're also paying 2 people's, work comp and FICA and SUTA, right? So, but that's definitely something you could do. So instead of having 2 positions here, we can just say hours spent to run this room.
Mhm.
And for that hours, you can put your wage and divide it or multiply it by the 60 hours, whatever you need. The only caution is, are you paying for those hours on overtime or you're paying for them straight time?
Right, yeah. And
So,
Lindsay,
mean-
are you finding that your actual hours, you're covering everything with your floaters 1, 2, and part-time in addition to the 2 teachers you've got slotted there?
Yeah, so we were really struggling with our hiring pool to get openers and closers. So it's a shift that we've made recently that's really working and is reflected in the spreadsheet. We have 2 floaters, 2 of our pods. And when I say pods, similar age classrooms are full. So we have 2 infant and 2 toddler classrooms open, and they share a kitchen bathroom area. So that's a pod to us. Instead of having the 2 full-time teachers and an opener and a closer, we've switched our staff to working 4 10-hour days. So there's 5 total staff. So one of those floaters is dedicated to the infant pod and one is dedicated to the toddler pod. And so we aren't needing openers and closers in those areas, because with 4 teachers in those 2 classrooms working a 10-hour day, we're able to stagger their hours enough that there's someone there from open to close, and then they get an entire day off. And we found that it's cutting down on some issues with like, oh, I have to go to the doctor on Wednesday. Well, then trade the Wednesday person. It's cutting down on our need for substitutes. And so that's why we have 2 floaters. Eventually, when those 2 preschool classrooms get full, which ours are super low just because we don't have a bunch of preschoolers yet, we'll have to add floater 3 in there. And so we're just kind of putting them in a different pocket. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
and as far as these rooms go, I do not come from a very wide background of daycare and childcare. So a lot of this may have been me just trying to make sure I understood how the numbers and how the class sizes fit together. But there are other easier ways of doing this, and you don't have to break it out quite as much. But I saw a lot of value in making sure I knew how much are we spending on those rooms and what are we bringing in. And that's really helped us with some of our decisions on, we don't want to go out and get a whole nother 2 or 3 baby room to make up that money, because that's not going to allow us to grow our daycare. We need to make sure we have the spots available in our 4 and 5 room so we can grow into that, and we're not having to turn parents away later on in their child's daycare experience.
Something that Matea and Todd, something our director and our assistant director provided to Todd when he did this, they sat down and projected out every child in our childcare, what room they'll need to be in when, and made this like complicated map basically of where the pockets are, where we can add kids, when we have an opening in each room. And so they were able to kind of provide us that information as a board when Todd was making this tool. So we didn't do that part, but Matea and Kylie did.
And one thing that really helped us out, and I think we're a little different at the time we made this, we kind of found out what our rate is. So right now we can only take, help me out here, 20, I think it's 20 infants every 18 months. So that breaks out into like 14 infants per year is what we're taking. And that's how we are establishing our enrollment and our growth. So, here we sat down, we said, how many students or how many children are we looking at doing that? And we were able to find that, yeah, this is pretty accurate with what we wanted. This is about 14 kids per year is what we're taking. So that allowed us to kind of project, like, right now we're losing a lot of cash, and we know why that is. We know we're losing cash because our rooms are not full yet. We still have to keep that one teacher there, even though she has like 3 or 4, preschool or 4 and 5-year-olds that she can take care of. She can take care of 20, but she's maybe only at 6 or so right now. So what we wanted to make sure is we weren't putting all of that burden onto the parents for us to grow, because we could really take this and set our right now. So these are our rates, and our rates are tied to Go Change In, and we could jack all these rates up to $350 today and be like, we want to make break even right now. But that's not a realistic goal that we wanted to go after, because we know we're going to be losing cash until we get full. When we get full, we're bringing it in. We're really utilizing all of our teachers in the most efficient way to make money and break even in the facility.
Good. I was gonna say that you've got all these tabs down here. Maybe we can explain a little bit about how we use this to project out, because we were looking at what's our current tuition as a board. This is where we were confused. We needed Todd, the mathematician, to come in. Okay, we're charging this much. We've been open a year. We want to pay our teachers more. Parents can't afford to shoulder the burden, the cost of actual care. How are we going to raise our rates at a fair market value and continue to support our teachers with a healthy living wage? And so that was where the conversation started. And this tool that Todd made allowed us to go plug in different variables and see how they impacted the greater good of the budget.
Yep. So I'll finish this little part here, and then we'll get into that next forecasting phase. So we were on expenses for each of the room. We know what the admin expense was, and we know what our building expense was. So from there, our total expenses were about $786,000 based on this. And you'll notice that those are pretty close numbers, right? We're making $784,000 and we're spending about $786,000. So overall, just for our profit for the year, we're only losing about $2,000 right now, which is a pretty good number when you're talking about $750,000. So we had to get to this number by influencing our rates. So there's only so many strings you could pull on when you're looking at a system like this. There's 3 competing, think of it like a triangle. There's 3 competing principles here. You've got your parents, you've got your daycare center, and you've got your staff. So each of them are tug of warring, and if you help one out, either somebody has to give or you need to. They're all fixed to one another, right? If we want to pay our teachers more, well, either the center needs to lose money or parents need to spend more money. And the same way, parents, they want to pay less. Well, where does that money come from? You're either taking away money from the center or you're taking away money from the parents. Those 3 things are very closely correlated. And if you influence one, somebody else has to give a little. So I think that was important for us. Like, this business is staffing and food. That's what you're going to spend the most money on, is what we found out on. And those things are not, we can't go without food, right? We can't go without staffing. So they're all very, very closely correlated with one another. So our profit was about $2,000 loss for a year, which is great. And we backed into that, right? So originally we had rates at like, I'm gonna change this 175. We'll just do them all at 175, right? Right there with our rates, we were losing. This is our profitability number. We were losing $144,000. So that's just what our rates change did. And then here we can get into some of this. We had some outside funding we included in, and then here's where we did our teachers pay, and we built in our raises into here. So we know that if we're going to use this model for many out years, we want to take into account for those out years that our teachers, you know, deserve a raise and they deserve to make a fair salary for that. And then we also took into account our increases on gas and electrical. We know inflation hits all of those things. So here, this is 9%. And this is what we used to say, all right, if we're paying our electric bill now, chances are in 2025, we think that's going to be 9% higher than it currently is. And that allowed us to put both, you know, raises and inflation into our forecast. So I'll say it again. This right here is our budgeting tool. It's our model for what we think of for any given month or year. And from that, we were able to find some pretty cool things. So we found out, you know, this is all of our revenue, where our revenue's coming in at. Here's our expenses, where are all of our expenses coming in at. And as you can see, you know, this admin, that's all staff. These rooms, these are all staff, right? So about 80% of your expenses that we pay as a daycare is coming from staffing, which we have to have per law, right? And then our building was about 21% of our total expenses. And we broke out our building costs into this, and our heaviest hitters for building costs, that's the supplies, that's food supplies, right? To run the kitchen, electrical, gas, those are some of our big ones. Insurance was another one, and our cleaning contracts. Work comp, that's part of the staffing too. But if you take all those out, you know, it really shows you where our heavy hitters are at. So we did this for 1 month, and we said, you know, we found out when we projected that we're going to be at full capacity, and that was June of 2025 is when we're planning on being full capacity, and we want to break even with our profits. So this is where we took those numbers and we went over and we made our forecast. So this forecast is built into years. So this is 22, 23, 24, and out to 25. And in 25, you'll see here this June, that's where we're finally hitting our 74 kids. And you can see, you know, where we're breaking even at. And this is, you know, where we want to start at. When we have all of our staff being used and efficiently, and we have a full daycare of kids, we want to back calculate. We want this number to equal zero, essentially, which, you know, it's $164 is close. So we set our rates and figured out what would it take for us to have rates hit zero while making sure that we're accounting for inflation and we're giving staff raises every year to make sure we're being competitive as a workforce employer. So that's where we came up with this June 2025.
So
Then-
Lindsay, are you guys for that number for 74, when Todd was talking about the 14 infants, have you guys kind of decided 14 is that infant number you're going to stay at? And as you take infants, as infants transition out of that room, you'll fill, but only keep it at 14, but everybody will continue to transition up and then you'll fill those spots. Is that what you projected?
We our original plan was 2 infant, 2 toddler, 2 preschool, nice and clean, simple. That's not reality. We have a ton of babies. And so we actually have a lot more than 14 infants. That's just how many we can intake every year. But they go from like 6 weeks to 10 months, 10 months to 18 months. And we actually decided to add, instead of having 2 full preschool rooms, which looks really nice on our budget, 40 preschoolers is great. We had eliminated a preschool room and started creating transition rooms. So we have an infant to toddler transition and a toddler to preschool transition room to help take on more of those younger kids that we're seeing, because our infant wait list is always there. And our preschool wait list isn't really, those kids are kind of at the public school. They're already somewhere. They were being taken care of even in a hodgepodge way before we opened. So like, we're trying to grow those babies into our center organically, and our populational flux, and we'll have to adjust that again. But we have so many babies right now, and it's just killing us from the budget. Like it's awful. But that's who needs help, and we're trying to figure that out. But we also have to find the balance between helping our community and staying open. And so we can't. Somebody said, you can't save all the puppies to me one time in a different context. And I'm like, that's my urge, is to save all the puppies. But reality is we can only take so many without folding. So it's the fine line Todd's helping us find.
Well, and that also led us to, there's a lot more preschoolers to help us bring in revenue. And one decision we made was to normalize the tuition from baby to toddler to preschooler. So that way, if we justified it and we went over to those infants room and we said, well, we want you to bring us back $3 for every $1 we spend, that would be a pretty hefty burden for those infant parents to have to pay for, to hold their weight up, versus, we're early enough into our experience that we decided to go back and just normalize it all. That way it's a consistent fee you're paying throughout our daycare center. And I don't know, we had some good, we had some bad, but for the most part, our parents, they seem pretty open to that. So essentially you're using a preschooler tuition to subsidize what it would cost to have a daycare center full of babies, right? So that was a decision we made to help us. Some of these room or numbers for infants were way higher numbers that, still weren't even doing it justice. So this allowed it to make it a little bit easier for us. So we found our month out here in 25 that we knew we were full and we wanted to break even. So we decided, well, we need to go from, July of 22 up to 25 and still be able to hit that number. And, we're at 175, 170, 165. For our rates. Well, we didn't want to just jump up to 215 right away for everything. So that kind of set us 2 points, right? Here's where we are and here's where we need to be. And the governance of how we get to those points is our running balance. So we established a number as a board. We said at no point do we want to get, over about $250,000 in cash burn. So we started our running balance of $0 in July. And here, this is our enrollment for students. We have inflation raises. There's none in July because we were currently in that year, right? We had our total staff down, our tuitions. And then here, these numbers were gleaned from this other spreadsheet, right? That showed what our forecast was, and pulled that number from that budgeting tool we already made. So you can see our income, expenses, and profits. Then we had our outside funding and what our net profit is with our profits and that additional outside funding. We wanted to make sure we separated so we knew when we were going to break even by ourselves as a daycare and when we were going to break even with help from outside agencies. And that was just another tool we had. And then right now our net profits was about a loss of $15,000 a month. So we continued projecting that out, and we did that up until 2025. So we kind of backed in these numbers, and you can see here for like the yearly running balance. I think this is our worst month right here is October of 24. We hit negative $250,000. So we had a $250,000 loss. And we were able to back calculate, we decided November, that was going to be the month we changed all of our rates. So every November, we told parents expect a rate change. And then in January is where we decided we're going to start giving out our raises. So that way we're making sure we're collecting in more money to account for the fact that in January, we're going to have to start paying our people more, and we're going to have to pay more for an inflation percentage. So here we have inflation at 6% and our raises, we are at 3%. Well, those both step up in January of 25 to 9% and 6%. But we've already collected a higher tuition for 2 months to offset what we know that was coming in for increased raises. Versus if we did it opposite and we had our tuition go up in April, well, we have, a few months here that we're losing money because we haven't changed our tuition to account for the new raises and the new inflation. So, increase what's coming in before you increase what's going out, right? To make sure we're kind of levelized for our profits. So this is how we came up with our forecasting tool. And we can see, as the months go along, our enrollment steadily going up, and we're starting to see the amount we're burning per month is really dropping off. And now when we take and go to our board meetings, we can say, all right, by this time in 2023, we should be only experiencing a $9,000 a month loss. How are we doing? Are we sticking with our budgets? And maybe here, when we find out we're at $15,000 in September, we might need to relook at our tuition and say, is 210 right? Are we staying? This gives us a roadmap. Are we going to make sure we stay under $250,000 total loss, or should we really up these numbers to 215 now? And just that's what we have to do to be able to run our child care center successfully. So is there any questions about this forecasting tool or any thoughts?
Sarah asked about subsidy kiddos. So we run our subsidy a little differently. We have kids on the subsidy. Our population is pretty low, but we have a separate fund called our tuition or scholarship fund. And so we use that a couple of different ways, and we have local donors that contribute to that, businesses. Its initial intent was to support families who don't qualify for subsidy but still need support. So we have an application process for that and a separate committee that looks at it. I chair that committee, and we have somebody from the school and our social worker from the health center that helps us look through those applications. We have gotten 0 of those in the year that we've been open. But 2 other ways that we use that scholarship fund: one is to offer our staff a different rate, a lower rate of care. And the other way is to help with our subsidy loss. So basically what we do anytime we have a child on the subsidy is say, okay, we're losing $20 a week on you. We pull those funds from the tuition scholarship fund. So no matter what, we're making the dollar figure we need, no matter if they're private pay or subsidy pay. And so in our spreadsheet, we're able to just have a clean look at it. We kind of call it shorting the gap, and I don't know where the actual term of that, but that's basically, in my understanding, what we're doing is covering the loss there, so we never actually feel the loss. And it allows us to support more kiddos on the subsidy because of those local donors. But that's kind of like a different program and a different pot of money that isn't really part of this budget. I will say we don't use it really. I mean, it's sitting there, most of it rolls over. We use it mostly for staff.
Yeah, I think it's a great benefit for your staff, especially when it's hard to recruit. That could be a great way to recruit in and keep your fee at that level that you've determined. So Lindsay, at the beginning that you guys were originally doing like sliding scale fees. So have you done away with that then and then pulling over? This is just this is the fee, and If you're subsidy, we use our kind of scholarship fund to subsidize that gap, or if you're a staff, we subsidize it. Other than that, this is the fee. Is that what you guys decided then?
Yeah, we have the sliding scale for those who qualify for our tuition program. So I can share that with this group too. We based it off of free and reduced lunch, but actually because we had so few people using it, we adjusted it a little bit so we could hopefully get more families to use the dollars. But it does look at, income level, family size, just the way free and reduced lunch does at school. They have to qualify for that based on income, but like when we were talking about normalizing or levelizing the fee, originally our rate structure was infants pay more, toddlers pay 10 less, preschoolers pay a little less. And when we started really breaking it down by classroom, that's when we saw like, oh my gosh, for infant parents to pay the actual cost of care, that would take food off their table. So we did offer a parent meeting. It wasn't well attended, but some came and, helped explain like basically when you have an infant start here, your cost of care is this, and it will stay that through preschool. So we're spreading out the burden of the costs throughout your time here at Boone Beginnings. And so once we could walk the parents through this, I think it helped them really understand. And something we're trying to add to our board is a parent advocate. So somebody who attends the center, who can come to meetings and understand the ins and outs of it and kind of be a liaison for us. And I think just being completely open with parents helps them be like, what is going on here? Or why did you change? This isn't how you did it. And we're just really transparent. Like, we've never done this before. We're living and learning. We have to stay open. And so these are the efforts we're making to stay open. And so once we can have those frank conversations, families do understand. And Matea and I, when we meet, are frustrated and still confused about why families don't access the tuition scholarship. Because our rate at the school for free and reduced lunch is much higher than what we're serving at the center. So are people not applying, or are people not coming here because they don't understand it? Those are the questions we're trying to understand.
I would say statewide with our early learning scholarship program that we implemented with the PDG, it's very underutilized too. So it's a statewide thing. I don't know. Again, if it's just people aren't aware of it and so they don't know they can apply, or if they're just really like that number is like people are just barely above it and so they don't qualify, or they're just getting subsidies. So I don't know, but that's it. I think that's statewide, Lindsay. It's not just Albion or Boone.
That makes me feel a little better, because I thought, are we not friendly? Like, we're plugging this on social media, we're putting articles in the paper, we're starting to put things in like the birth bags at the hospital, here's our program, look it up when you're ready. And part of it is too, all kids go to school, right? So they're all applying for free and reduced lunch. Not all kids go to childcare. So there's a chunk of kids that are in that free and reduced lunch statistic that might just be home with a relative or a parent. But I know there are kids out there that could use it that just aren't. And it's frustrating to me. And I'd love to see it fixed, but I haven't figured that out yet.
Todd, is there anything else you want to wrap up on this, or does anybody have any questions for Todd or Lindsay?
Yeah, I guess I know I was at the Thrive conference and I sat through an accounting. They did kind of some of the budgeting behind daycares. And one of the highlights I took back from there for myself and the board is reporting what your tuition rates are to the state and how those numbers are used. So, and I do not know as much about this as I'm sure, Shauna, you would know about this, but when they're sending out surveys asking what your tuition costs are, the lady who was giving the presentation really broke it down into 3 buckets. There's market value tuition, which is, now we're all looking at these daycare centers and in-home, or the centers versus in-home. They're looking at them as competitors, right? So this is a marketplace. If her rates are $150 for a kid versus the center that's $160 for the kid, you're competing against each other to make sure you're bringing in enough parents for that. So that was, the marketplace rate description versus what is the actual cost of care. So I think what we did over here with this budgeting tool, we're looking at actual cost of care. We don't care as much what the rates are in Albion. And, if somebody comes up and is like, well, this is crazy. There's places that are charging 150, 175 bucks, and you guys are around 200 right now. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't apply to us. We know what the rates or what money we need to bring in to be able to run and staff our daycare center with everything we provide. So by doing this, we were able to truly find what our actual cost of care is, because we know what we're spending on these kids, and what we need to balance that at zero. And then the next step is the quality cost of care. And this is all right, well, we need to make sure we're sending our people and our staff to get trained. We want to do a natural playground, so we need to know what money we need to bring in so we can offset the cost to really take it from just taking care of kids to, we're doing significant things with all of our playgrounds, and we're providing real educational tools to get these young minds started. So this, I think right now where we are is actual cost of care. And we throw in a lot of elements. I know Lindsay and Matea have great resource guides, but there are other programs that, if we wanted to look into and go to, we need to make sure we factor that into our budget. So when reporting those numbers, I think we need to give them not the market value tuition. We need to at least give them what the actual cost of tuition is. But to do that, I don't want to pick on the lady, but there was a in-home provider from North Platte, and she put on the screen her budget. And the first thing I noticed from her screen is she's an in-home provider, but she did not pay herself in her budget. And I'm sure there's other things she had, money offsetting the house rent, for the daycare space. So there is some things in there, but at the same time, she's not doing it just to live in a house. She needs to make a living off of this, and she has to pay herself. So without doing that, how accurate is this budget going to be? So this is where, stepping back and looking at your finances and be honest. Everybody deserves to make this money. You're not hiding anything, and let the numbers speak for themselves. So, with our, what we wanted to make sure we were included in there was, making sure teachers are getting raises. It hurts, it offsets, as we're trying to grow, that raises is going to have to be picked up. Somebody has to pay the bill on it. As a daycare center, we need to stay in business. So we need to show, we need to break even with our expenses and our incomes. So if teachers want raises, the parents are going to have to pick that up, and you need to factor that in to how you're setting your parents' fees. Or, I look at like the strings we can pull. The daycare has to break even for us to stay in business. Nobody's, doing this out of the goodness. Like, we need to be able to support ourselves. But what the daycare and our child center can do is we can go search for outside funding to come help offset, giving our staff raises. That's how they can contribute, right? And staff, that's where they want raises. We have to go fundraise, or we have to go and raise our parents' tuition. But there's only so many strings we can pull. So, anytime we're talking about that, the first questions we ask is, how are we going to pay for this?
Yeah, Todd, you hit the nail on with the hammer when you talked about reporting what it actually costs to provide the care rather than your market rate. And I know the state is re-examining how they can pull those numbers or grab those numbers. So this is a really important number for you all to know and start working on, so that when they are ready to ask for that, you're able to give them the cost of care, not necessarily your market rate, so that eventually subsidy numbers can catch up to what your rates are, or at least closer than they are now. So this is great because this conversations are starting to happen at a state level. So this is good information. And Anne, I did see your question in the chat, and as Lindsay's response, basically the PDG money is not figured in here, as it's not something that can be counted on year in, year out. As of now, we are assuming that's going to end at the end of April. We don't know what will happen after that, but everybody should, if you're using PDG grant money, probably should consider that being something that will eventually be done. Any
And
other
I'm
questions?
sorry, I missed all of those chats. So is there anything unanswered in the chats that, or did everybody get everything answered? The iron triangle, nice.
Yeah, I wonder, Todd, you probably haven't listened to any of the podcasts or sustainability webinars or anything that we have, but there is something for childcare called the Iron Triangle, and exactly how you explained it. So
There you go.
for somebody who claims you don't know a lot about childcare, you know a lot about childcare.
Yeah. Todd has sat down. He's our newest board member. Todd has it been a little over a year?
Yep.
A year? Yeah, so he sat down and really just picked this all apart, which was great because it forced us all to look at it as it through new eyes, because we've been here and we're getting stuck in a rut and stale, and we've been through the building process. And so Todd's really helped us move into the operation mindset and pulled this apart. Somebody asked about the outside funding. Yes, those are two local donors to foundations that just said, hey, we're going to contribute X amount of dollars each year. We also participate in like our big give, which is through our Nebraska Community Foundation affiliated fund, the Boone County Foundation Fund. We usually raise about 15 grand each year, and we do it very project specific. So last year it was really focused on our playground. This year it's going to be really focused on our multi-purpose room and getting more opportunities in there for the kids to learn and grow. And you know, we have random things that come up, like Valero just had a volunteer day, and Saturday they worked on the playground, and they not only paid for, but built some new climbers and a book nook and a stage for us. And so you're constantly looking for local support. It's just not something you can count on ongoing to support your budget, just unless it's something like those two foundations we have, because, you know, every year Valero isn't going to come do something on the playground, but maybe next year Sentinel will come do something. You know, you're just, the fundraising and the support rallying never ends. So that's kind of like my job. So it's constant.
But with this spreadsheet and how Todd has it all broken down, I think being able to explain to your community when you are doing some of that, I think you can come up with some really good information to have some really good conversations with people. Why funding sources may need to be something that, if it's an annual commitment, how important they are if you can make those partnerships.
Yeah,
and that's one thing we did notice.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we were looking at kind of like what Red Cloud's doing, a business partnership program. We're getting to the end of, we had 5-year commitment forms when we did our original capital campaign, and those are ending this year, this calendar year. And so we're looking at, as a board, how can we now continue that support with those initial donors through like something like what Red Cloud has done with their business partnership program, because that's really cool. And I think it's an amazing idea. So we're considering how we can adapt that to our community. Sorry, Todd, go ahead.
Well, and just to highlight the importance of some of those outside funding and those business partners that are with you. So this green line is your income, and this blue lines are expenses. So where these lines hit right here, that's that magical June date in June 2025, where we're seeing our income and expenses hit zero together. And that's when we're breaking even. We're starting to, tread water as a daycare. This brown line is our running balance with the grant included in there, that grant money. This yellow line was without the grant money. So with our grant money, we peak out right around $250,000 or $250,000 loss. However, without that funding, we would hit close to $410,000 loss. Just, and how that grant money helps out over time. So, watching these peak up and flatline and go down, that was important for us when we're talking with our partners, being like, see, this is how much your money is being used and how it's keeping us from, hitting how much we saved up for that burn money until we get to full staff. If we didn't have that money, we would be on a lot shakier grounds right now, in terms of if this was a viable daycare, in the end of 2024.
That's great. I guess that's so good. Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Todd, for spending a little bit of your time this morning with us. We're right at about an hour, and I know you're at work, so I don't want to keep you any longer than that. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I guess we'll send these out again to all of you and have you take a look at them. And then if you have any specific questions like that, I think maybe just emailing Lindsay directly, she might be able to help answer anything that you might have after today.
Yeah,
Yep.
and don't worry about it. Just email me if you got any questions. If you're trying to build something like this, I can also help you if you're trying to work through that. So, reach out if you need anything.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.